And I would much rather have a Democratic Party living somewhere within the realm of reason, where discussions are possible, than living in the realm of Columbia University Tentifada students running as mayor of New York or president of the United States. So where's all the socialism coming from? It is, in fact, as we've been talking about, the triumph of Bernie Sandersism in the Democratic Party. And Sanders is high on his own supply. He is just over the moon about all this. Finally, at long last, at the end of his long chain of uselessness, Bernie Sanders reigns triumphant over the Democratic Party. Here he was, praising Zoran Mamdani.
No, Chris, would not compare it to Obama or to Clinton. What Zoran understood is that in order to win, you got to be more than charismatic, and he is. You got to be more than smart, which he is. You got to build a strong grassroots movement around a progressive agenda. He had thousands and thousands of people knocking on doors because they were excited about his message.
Okay, so again, what did he have? Well, he was very progressive, says Bernie Sanders. In fact, Bernie is running against the Democratic Party. Here he was telling Chris Hayes that this is an insurgency against the top levels of the Democratic Party.
Look, what is the Democratic Party today, Chris? It is, I don't think people can argue with us. It is funded by very wealthy people. It is run by inside the Beltway consultants who really have very little clue about what's going on in the real world. And that is why I think, sadly, Kamala Harris lost an election that she should have won.
Okay, so again, his claim is that if the Democratic Party goes further and further to the left, they will be more and more successful. That is his claim. And that is the claim of many inside the top levels of the radical wing of the Democratic Party. Mara Gay, she was out there explaining that actually Zoran Mamdani is unbelievable. She's a member of the New York Times editorial board, saying he had an unbelievably appealing message to voters. Sure, that message was, I will just give you free ice cream, like every other person who's ever run for third grade class president. But it was so appealing.
First of all, Assemblyman Mamdani did something that Democrats in Washington and across the country have struggled to do of late, which is he simply was clear about where he stands, what he believes, and what he's willing to fight for. And it was also a really positive vision. So rather than just bashing Donald Trump, or in this case, his mayoral opponent, Andrew Cuomo, he actually talked about the kind of city and the kind of community that he wanted to see. And that was appealing. It was attractive to voters.
So, yeah, so appealing, so attractive. Tim Walz's daughter is also one of the people who's out there paying homage. The younger generation, these are the people we need to listen to.
What happened yesterday in New York City happened because progressive policies are popular. I know it might surprise some people, but feeding kids lunch, providing childcare, having accessible and functional public transportation, among many other things, are popular policies everywhere. They're popular everywhere. And they're common sense, right? Like when you think about this country, you think about it's a great place to grow up and raise a family and like build your life, or at least that's how it should be. And with that comes feeding kids lunch, allowing people to get to and from work in like a timely, efficient, affordable manner, providing people childcare while they go to work, right? All of that is common sense and it's popular. And I've said this since the beginning, it's all messaging.
It's all messaging, guys. If you just message socialism in the right way, it'll be great. We have trained an entire generation of idiots not to understand how markets work, how profit works, how capitalism works, how cost and benefit work, how government programs work. And because they've been removed from all of it, they now get to sit around and theorize that they're magical solutions that they just came up with 1 second ago, don't you know? That those will all work. Sure, they've never worked well in the past, but now they will work. Now they will. And it's dolts like Stephen Colbert leading the way. These past middle-age gray hairs who are still pretending they're cool with the younger set.
Yesterday, in a stunning upset, Democratic Socialist Zoran Mamdani won the Democratic mayoral primary.
Huge applause.
That's extraordinary. That's extraordinary. Mamdani is now on track to become the city's first South Asian mayor, first Muslim mayor, and the youngest mayor in over a century.
Wow. Well, that's really what matters, is his ethnic identity. And for these people, it actually does. The fact that he is a radical leftist who believes everything it is possible for a radical leftist to believe is the feature, not the bug. The younger generation of Democrats, again, pushed forward by very rich, white, far leftists in the media. That younger generation is eating the Democratic Party from the inside out. It's why there's still some in the Democratic Party who believe that people like Jamal Bowman are the wave of the future. Jamal Bowman was an ally of AOC. He was ousted, of course, in a Democratic primary, largely because Jews showed up to vote against him because he's a rabid anti-Semite. But here he is on CNN. And this person, I promise you, he'll run for Congress again, Jamal Bowman. And given the trajectory in New York, he could win again. Given the trajectory of the left, he could be back in Congress. Why not? Here he was on CNN saying that the reason black people have higher rates of obesity is because of the N-word.
Your colleagues in the Republican Party do not hold each other accountable when it comes to the racism that comes from the party on a consistent basis.
Congressman, I mean, where are you on
you
the
can't be calm about
attempts?
this. I'm a black man in America. The reason why heart disease...
I'm white, I can't comment
Listen
on
to
that?
what I'm saying. The reason why heart disease and cancer and obesity and diabetes are bigger in the black community is because of the stress we carry from having to deal with being called the N-word directly or indirectly every day. If your colleagues would listen and try to learn and engage and grow and stop being so hateful, we could have a better country.
So again, obesity, cancer, heart disease, all because of the N-word. I'm going to need some stats to back that up, like some causative stats to back that up, that it's racism, people calling people the N-word, which is happening less now than it did in, say, the 1960s. But the rates of obesity were lower in the 1960s than they are now. I'm going to need like a connect there from Jamal. But you know who wouldn't? Zoran Mamdani. He would understand that right away. He would understand the suffering. He'd do this faux sincerity routine. He's so sincere. He's so enthusiastic. Zoran Mamdani. We're supposed to believe that he look at the enthusiasm from this 33-year-old whippersnapper and he's speaking like this because he knows how you feel on the inside. If this is the thing that Democrats are looking for, man, good luck to them. Good luck to them. And again, it's not just, I don't want to pick on Mamdani alone. I'd like to pick on this entire wing of the Democratic Party. Jasmine Crockett, who's now the hot new thing, right? Even fresher and even facer than AOC. Here she was saying she's going to take pride in calling people xenophobic because hell yes, this is what the times require.
Yes, we will say people are xenophobic because when you start to decide that just because somebody came from another country, they are automatically some kind of criminal, that does sound kind of xenophobic to me because you are using a paintbrush to paint an entire group of people where the vast majority of them are coming here because they are actually seeking a better life.
Okay, so if you're in favor of borders now, then you hate everyone who's from a foreign country or something. This is what the radical Democrats are standing for. It's Bernie Sanders with a smattering of ethnic diversity. Obviously, you can make the argument that if you're a Republican, you want Democrats to continue following the Bernie Sanders, Zoran Mamdani path. I'm going to make the case that this is a mistake. The reason I think this is a mistake is that the country is better off when you have two parties that are at least living in the suburbs of reality. As I've said before, I think President Trump lives full-time in reality. I think he is a very realistic person who responds to incentive structures. The problem with the Democratic Party that swings out to the radical left the way that we are watching right now, they could have a George McGovern moment where they just get blown out in 2028, the same way that they got blown out in 1972 when they decided to run on acid and peacenik nonsense from George McGovern. It's also possible that things could go wrong. It's a very dangerous game to pick your opponents and hope that those opponents are then going to lose to you. Sometimes it works, but sometimes it doesn't. And I would much rather have a Democratic Party living somewhere within the realm of reason, where discussions are possible, than living in the realm of Columbia University Tentafada students running as mayor of New York or president of the United States. Because my great fear is that in a two-party country, one of those parties has to win. And if the Republicans fall down in any way, shape, or form, this very high-stakes poker right here, if the Republicans fall down in any way, shape, or form, you could see a deeply radical, anti-American person become president of the United States. You could. It is always a possibility. Enough dissatisfaction creates backlash, and that backlash can come in some pretty hideous forms, which is why it is so important that Republicans continue to pass the big, beautiful bill. Now, there's a major holdup with regard to the big, beautiful bill. Apparently, the Senate parliamentarian has now decided that there are serious problems with the big, beautiful bill. So there were decisions publicized Thursday from the Senate parliamentarian that affects several major pieces of the big, beautiful bill. The one giant piece of legislation that includes the Trump tax cuts, funding for immigration, funding for a wide variety of priorities. So again, according to the Senate parliamentarian advised that actually several provisions of the one big, beautiful bill would be subject to a 60-vote threshold if they remain in the bill. Remember, this is supposed to be passed under reconciliation. What that means is that because the budget is really, really important, essentially there is a rule in the Senate and the House that you can pass by 51 votes in the Senate, not having to overcome a filibuster, a budget bill. If there's a bunch of extraneous stuff in the budget bill, then theoretically that could be struck down by the parliamentarian as not really inside the budget and therefore subject to a 60-vote filibuster. Alrighty, so you're asking, what does the Senate parliamentarian do? Well, don't ask me, ask my sponsors over at Perplexity. So here's what Perplexity says. The Senate parliamentarian is the official nonpartisan advisor to the United States Senate on the interpretation and application of Senate rules, precedents, and parliamentary procedure. The parliamentarian and their staff provide guidance to the presiding officer, Senate leaders, individual senators, and committees on how to conduct Senate business in accordance with established rules and precedents. Key responsibilities include advising the presiding officer on procedural questions, motions, the appropriateness of amendments or measures. Now, the parliamentarian's authority is advisory, not binding. The presiding officer of the Senate, usually a senator or the vice president, formally makes procedural rulings, and the Senate can, in fact, overrule the parliamentarian's advice. So how does that work? Well, the presiding officer, in this case the vice president or the Senate majority leader, can choose to ignore the rule by the Senate parliamentarian. If that happens, then any Democrat can get up and challenge the ruling by raising a point of order. And then the full Senate votes on the point of order. A 51-vote majority can uphold or overturn the presiding officer's ruling, effectively overturning the parliamentarian's recommendation. Now, this only happened quite rarely. It happened in 1975. It happened again in 2013 and 2017 when the Senate changed filibuster rules for nominations. That, of course, is when Democrats did this for judicial nominees to their great detriment, as it turned out. So the question is, what is the parliamentarian doing? According to the New York Times, Elizabeth McDonough, the parliamentarian who enforces the chamber's rules, said several of the measures in the big, beautiful bill that would provide hundreds of billions of dollars in savings could not be included in the legislation in their current form. So remember, reconciliation bills also have to be budget neutral. They're not supposed to be adding to the deficit. One of the ways that Republicans were going to get around this is through a series of procedural loopholes that allow them to sunset certain provisions and not sunset other provisions, and also some cuts to Medicaid, for example, future spending of Medicaid. And those cuts would come in the form of work requirements. And she says, well, that actually is not going to count as a cut, meaning that the big, beautiful bill will then no longer be budget neutral, which would actually basically kill the bill. According to McDonough, those measures include one that would crack down on strategies many states have developed to obtain more federal Medicaid funds, and another that would limit repayment options for student loan borrowers. The decisions dealt a blow to Senate Republicans as they attempt to pass the behemoth legislation by President Trump's deadline, which is July 4th, is when he wants to get this done by, the end of next week. Party leaders had hoped to begin voting on the bill this weekend in order to allow time for the House to pass it early next week, clearing it for the president's signature. So she's rejected a bunch of provisions, has McDonough. Now, again, Republicans don't necessarily have to listen to her. They could theoretically use what's called the nuclear option here. It appears that that is not what John Thune, the Senate Majority Leader, wants to do. So he put out a statement suggesting that it would not be a good option for getting a bill done to overrule her. President Trump, of course, is upset. Senator Tommy Tuberville of Alabama said, the woke Senate parliamentarian who was appointed by Harry Reid and advised Al Gore just struck down a provision banning illegals from stealing Medicaid from American citizens. This is a perfect example of why Americans hate the swamp. Now, again, McDonough was, in fact, appointed originally by Harry Reid. There's no reason she should have continue to serve under Republican administrations or with a Republican majority. This throws a wrench into the goals here for Senate Republicans. However, is this going to be the final holdup? Absolutely not. Republicans understand this thing has to get passed. They're going to have to work around this. Senator Thune is a professional at this. I would assume he's going to have to come up with some new proposals, new cuts, new changes to the bill that will allow it to pass the muster of the parliamentarian. Well, that's all for now, folks. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and comment your thoughts down below. Be sure to check out all of the other great content on my channel. I'll see you here next time.